going to allow something that should be seen in mainland China, the creation of quarantine camps, that the government has the right to pull you from your home with no proof that you're sick, with no way to get out, and to be able to have that type of draconian control was allowed through a health department regulation. And one person found that, one person brought that case forward, and one person made us victorious, and that's Bobbie Anne Cox. So we're going to fight totalitarian dictatorship in this state. We're going to push back. We're going to tell people enough is enough. Bobbie Anne is going to talk about not only the quarantine camp, but also the ERA. So, Bobbie Anne, please.
So great to be back. Thank you, Trish Turner, for another fabulous, wonderful conference. So I've been practicing law here in New York for 25 years. And prior to COVID, I had nothing to do with constitutional law and civil rights. I was minding my own business in Westchester with my law practice. I had worked in Manhattan at a big international law firm for a few years, and then went out into the suburbs and was doing my own practice. And then COVID hit, and you know, the world went crazy, particularly New York. And the governor, first it was Cuomo, then it was Hochul, wanted to decide who they were going to pick and choose and throw into isolation or quarantine facilities where you would have no say in where you went, and there was no time restriction on how long they could have kept you in there, and there was no provision on how you could get out of quarantine once they put you in there. When we were in front of the trial court judge 2 years ago, he said to the Attorney General, he said, so let's say you take a family, and let's say you put them into a facility somewhere, a hospital or whatever. Once they're in there, how do they get out? And there was a really pregnant pause, and then the chief was like, well, I guess they could hire a lawyer and they could sue us. And they stick to that today. We're now on our second appeal. They're still saying that. Well, you know, you can just find a lawyer and hire them and, you know, sue your way out of quarantine. That, you don't need to be a lawyer to make that resonate in your brain. I mean, my brain explodes when I hear that. That is the antithesis of due process. And our Constitution says that due process is required in all of our laws and in all of our regulations. And that one had zero. And it was made not by the legislators. It was made by the Department of Health and the governor. Unbelievable. Unelected bureaucrats sitting in the Department of Health that you've never met, you can't vote them in and out. This is why we have a constitution that says the legislators make the laws, because you don't like what they're doing, vote them out. You can't vote out agency representatives, they're bureaucrats. So this lawsuit has now turned into, we won in 2022, the court struck it down, said, nope, sorry, this is so unconstitutional, here's a whole list of reasons why. The main thing was separation of powers. They took the power of Senator Borrello, Assemblyman Tague, Congressman Lawler, who was Assemblyman Lawler at the time, and all their colleagues in the New York State Legislature, and they took their power and they made a law. They called it a regulation, but it was a law. So it got struck down. Hochul and Tish James, our Attorney General, decided to wait until after the 2022 election, and then they appealed. So last year, we spent the whole year fighting the appeal, and the appellate court decided in November, well, first of all, we had oral arguments in September. 400 of you showed up to oral arguments, which was phenomenal. I want to thank every single person. I didn't get to meet everyone that showed up, but I want to thank every single person that took the time. It was a Wednesday morning, that took the time out of their busy schedule, skipped work, and came to the courthouse. And 400 of you sat there quietly. It wasn't a protest. There were no obnoxious signs. There were no t-shirts, you know, we hate Hochul, nothing. It was very respectful. Who would do stand for this. This is not the country that we want. Unfortunately, the appellate division decided to reverse and dismiss, meaning they said, lower court, your decision no longer stands, so they reversed, and then they dismissed for lack of standing, saying that my plaintiffs don't have the right to bring the lawsuit because they didn't have any injury. It not only is ridiculous, it goes against New York State case law from the highest court. So we are appealing now to the Court of Appeals. And I just have to say, the gravity of this case, it's no longer just about whether or not you can get ripped out of your house and thrown into a quarantine camp. It's now also about, are we gonna allow unelected bureaucrats in agencies to overrule legislators and the laws they make? We already have a quarantine law. We've had a quarantine law for 70 years, but it's full of due process protections. Number one thing that our law from 1953 says is before you even consider locking somebody up, they have to actually first be sick. Doesn't that make sense? Not the regulation. In the regulation, the Department of Health doesn't have to prove that you're sick. They don't have to prove you were exposed to a communicable disease. So it's mind-boggling. We can't allow it to happen. But because the appellate court reversed, which means they threw out my lower court decision, Hochul and the DOH can reinstitute that regulation tomorrow if they wanted. That's what that means. I'm now also fighting for the right of lawmakers in New York State to sue another branch of government when they feel like their power has been usurped. Right? So now, the Fourth Department is saying, no, legislators can't sue in this kind of an instance. There was no injury, there was no damage. Completely wrong. Completely wrong. So now this case has taken on another level of gravity. But I want to shift gears right now because Julie, thank you for that introduction, by the way. Julie mentioned the Proposition 1 that's going to be on the back of your ballot this November. The Dems call it the Equal Rights Amendment. Okay, we know that's not true. I filed a lawsuit in October to knock it off the ballot. So if you go to vote on November 5th and you turn over the ballot and there is no Proposition 1, you'll know that I won. If you go in and to vote and you turn over your ballot and there is Proposition 1, you'll know that I didn't win or the case is still going on and hasn't found its final resolution yet. Vote no. Vote no. It is so crucial that you tell everybody you know to vote no. It is a Trojan horse like we have never seen, and as an attorney on the front lines the last 4 years, fighting the tyranny every day, I am telling you, it will turn into a place that you have never imagined, that you will not want to live anymore. There will be lawsuits flying like crazy. Not mine, because I won't be able to get rid of all the crazy laws that they're going to pass. For example, there's a law that's been kicking around in the New York State Legislature for over 2 years that says that children of any age, minor children, pick a number, 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever, can make their own medical decisions. Not only can they make their own medical decisions, which includes everything. People always ask me, does that include a sex change? Yes, it does. It includes everything, dental work, psychiatric drugs, vaccines. It includes anything and everything because the language is so broad. Not only can they make their own decisions about it, you, parents, have no say. So if you go into a medical facility and say, I want to know what treatment you're giving my child, the medical provider will say, you know, I have to ask the kid first and see if they'll let me tell you. And then they'll ask the child, can I tell your parent what we're doing here? The other thing is that you'll get the bill anyway. In the true form of Democrats, right, you're going to get the bill anyway, and the law says, or the proposed law says, the insurance company, when they, if there is an insurance company, if there's, I'll get to that in a second, when the insurance company sends you your whatever they're sending you and the bill, and this is what you're going to, they have to code it so you don't know what you're paying for. Yep. So say goodbye to your parental rights, because if the ERA is now part of the Constitution and they pass that bill into law, I can't sue and say it's unconstitutional. Because the court's going to say, well, no, it's not. You know, 51% of the population of New York State voted to make this part of your Constitution, so sorry. So these are the sneaky things that when you read the language of Proposition 1, you're like, this isn't so bad. Oh, who doesn't want equal rights for everybody? Of course everybody wants equal rights for everybody else. But we already have laws in place in New York State that protect your rights. There's no need to go put it in the Constitution with such broad language that it can be interpreted any way. The way that a constitutional amendment works is the New York State Legislature has to pass the bill, so they create the bill, they pass the bill in 2 consecutive legislatures, meaning we have an election, we have a new legislature. In that 2-year period, they would have to present this bill and pass it. Then we have another election 2 years later, new legislature comes in, and then they have to pass the same exact bill into law. So twice, so it has to go through. So it's a 4-year cycle, basically. And then they can put it on the ballot for New Yorkers to vote on. So the Democrats finished this process of the 2 years and then 2 years in January of 2023. So what year are we in? 2024. And what do we have? A presidential election. So they waited until 2024, when we have a presidential election, to put this on the ballot, because they could have done it in 2023. They had plenty of time. So they're purposely waiting for 2024 because they want this to drive their voter base out. And they're trying to say it's all about abortion. Oh, we're going to codify abortion rights in the Constitution. Read the language. The word abortion does not appear in there. And by the way, New York State abortion laws allow you to have an abortion whenever you want, however you want. Like, it's, you know, do whatever you want. And that's not going to change in New York State. It's a Trojan horse, and it's a farce, and you have to see through it. The other thing, which, you know, Riley Gaines is one of the speakers this evening, along with Lee Zeldin, and she's going to talk more about this, but I do want to bring up the fact that, yes, women's sports, say goodbye to women's sports if this passes, because you can't discriminate against anybody for their gender identity. So a biological male could say, well, I feel like I'm a woman, so I'm going to go play in the women's basketball team or swim as against Riley and beat her out because I'm a guy and I couldn't make it in the male sport. So, you know, we're going to see that, but we're also going to see the abolition of women's remember women's liberation from the 1960s and 1970s that we all, our moms and grandmothers and great-grandmothers fought so hard for? Say goodbye. We are going to erase all of their work to become equal with men, because you're going to then see the disappearing act of female schools, female colleges, female locker rooms, female dormitories, well, yeah, that's it. Anything that's female-based, like, you know, the Girl Scouts, sororities, those are going to be a thing of the past. You will now not be able to stop biological men from entering our women's spaces. You won't be allowed to, because it will be discrimination if you do. So I can't believe, where are all the feminists in this state? Like, hello, where are you? Okay, we know you all disappeared during the past 4 years of insanity, but now you need to come back. You need to come back and you need to speak up, because we are in big trouble. We are in big trouble if we don't stop this. You want to codify abortion in our Constitution? Fine, do it. But just do that. You don't need to throw in 12 other characteristics into the language. So we know it's not just about abortion, but that's what they're saying it's about, because they feel like they won in 2022 on the abortion issue, because Roe versus Wade got tossed out. Which, by the way, you know, there is no, I mean, this is a tangent, but there is no federal constitutional right to an abortion. So Roe versus Wade was a bad decision anyway. And by the way, abolishing Roe versus Wade doesn't mean you can't get an abortion. It just means the states decide. It's a state right. It's not a federal right. One-party rule, I don't care which party it is toxic for the people, because there's no conversation happening. Okay, so in this case, it happens to be the Democrats. The Democrats are in control of New York State. Everything you do every day is determined by them. Think about that. They are shoving their agenda down your throat. 2 weeks ago, they passed the budget. Okay, I was watching on, you can watch the Senate and the Assembly live. I was taking notes. I was getting like blood boiling up in my veins. I'm not going to go through everything. I did write a pretty detailed Substack on it, so you guys can go on my Substack, but I will tell you this. There are children in New York State that are so poor, the only meal that they get is at school. And there was a proposal for the children, for there to be universal lunches for all the kids in the schools. And it would have cost $90 million, 90 with an M, million dollars. What do the Democrats do? Nope, can't do that. We don't have $90 million to feed the children that only get fed at school. Instead, we're going to give $2.4 billion with a B of your tax dollars that you bust your rump to pay to them, to the illegal immigrants in New York. To pay for their free housing, to pay for their free food, to pay for their free schooling, to pay for their free health care, and to give them each a $1,000 debit card each month. I want you to really chew on that. Really chew on that. Kids are going to go hungry in this state because these disgusting politicians in Albany want to give $2.4 billion. And by the way, no strings attached. They're not saying you got to stop the flow. They're not saying you got to kick out everyone that's not actually an asylum seeker, which is 90% of the people coming to this state are not asylum seekers. 90% are not. There's no conditions attached to that money. And last year, they gave them $1.8 billion with a B of our tax dollars. So $1.8 billion last year, $2.4 billion this year, no end in sight. Are you guys okay with this? No. Okay, so this is what we have to do, and I'm not even kidding. I need everybody in this room to get involved in a Senate race, a New York State Senate race. Get involved today. Why am I saying the state Senate? Because we need 11 seats to turn it from Democrat-controlled to Republican-controlled. And once we control one house, they're done. They can't pass these laws. They can't amend the Constitution. They can't get away with all this crap because the Republicans will control the Senate, and then there has to be a negotiation. No, we're not giving $2.4 billion again to the illegals. Nope, sorry guys. So 11 seats, some of those seats are very close. Get involved with, you don't have to live in their county. Every single one of the state candidates here, I'm positive, is looking for volunteers. You can make phone calls, you can send emails, you can stuff envelopes for them. Please get involved.